Let me ask you about John Brennan. John Brennan has been out and about trashing this president now for a year and a half. He had a quote yesterday about how horrible President Trump is about the NATO allies, and he tweeted about it as well. He says it is in the interest of America's security if NATO leaders push back against the reckless behavior of Donald Trump, who is dangerously naive and grossly ignorant of how the world works. History inevitably will regard Trump as one of the most disastrous figures of the 21st century. I bring this up because I think John Brennan is also being looked at in terms of you and your colleagues and what role he played with the State Department and all of this information around the FISA warrant. What can you tell us?
Well, first of all, there are questions about John Brennan's involvement in all of this, but let me just say what we do know are the public statements that he has made since leaving office, and I must tell you that for a former individual at a high level in the national security of the United States to make the statements and assertions he makes are absolutely reprehensible, and I think that this is something that people need to take into account of. He is not helping the national interests of the United States with some of the reckless claims that he makes in these statements. The fact of the matter is, with regard to our investigation, there is definitely question beyond what was going on in the FBI and the Department of Justice about the involvement of other Obama administration employees in the creation of the circumstances under which this investigation was launched, which, by the way, now is more than 2 years old and still going on, and I have not yet seen any evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. So
are you investigating John Brennan? I know that Devin Nunes is investigating the State Department. Are you investigating John Brennan?
Right now, that's in the hands of Mr. Nunes, but we are very, very interested because these matters are very closely connected, very interested in what he finds.
Connect the dots for us on the special counsel and this investigation. As you say, going on 2 years, it was supposed to be about collusion. There's no evidence of collusion, no evidence of obstruction. Are you looking, have you spoken with Robert Mueller? Do you think that that investigation comes to an end soon? Are you expecting that?
I have spoken with Robert Mueller, not recently. I have spoken with the Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Rosenstein. I have always supported the decision to appoint Mr. Mueller as special counsel and have always been meticulous about keeping the Judiciary Committee, unlike other committees in the Congress, away from investigating the same things Mr. Mueller is investigating. We are not looking at the substance of any potential Russian interference in the election or collusion with the Trump campaign. But there is no question that this is a major problem for any president of the United States for something to go on as long as it has without evidence being shown. The indictments that have occurred are all certainly important things, but they do not relate to the underlying purpose of its investigation with regard to the Trump campaign, and those things can be taken over by United States attorneys around the country, like the matters of Mr. Cohen are being handled by the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. And so I think that it is very important that if Mr. Mueller has something, he needs to act. If he does not, he needs to start wrapping this up because it is a cloud over this administration, and it needs to be brought to a resolution.
And what about Rod Rosenstein? I mean, we know that he was among those who gave the okay on the FISA warrant, which is questionable, given that the FISA warrant to spy on an American citizen, part of the Trump campaign, Carter Page, was used based on, what, a dossier that was unverified. Should he be recusing himself from all of this?
I don't have an opinion on that yet. There is no question that Mr. Rosenstein had some involvement once he became the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. However, I also know that he is an important part of our getting access to the documents in the Federal Bureau of Investigation to get at the facts about what was going on in 2016. He was not there then, and it's important that this access to the information that he has helped create continue.
Mr. Chairman, good to see you this morning. We'll be watching this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob Goodlatte there.